Hello, I'm Paul Behrman, and this is Talking About The Who, the podcast dedicated to that nice rock and roll band from Shepherd's Bush, London. Welcome to episode 7, the penultimate episode of season 2, featuring my conversation with Richard Evans. Richard is a long-time associate of The Who and has worked continually with the band since 1976. You'll hear more about his first assignment for The Who later in this episode. Since then, his design work has graced many Who album covers and tour merchandise, as well as solo releases by Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey. He's also the webmaster for thewho.com and manages the band's official social media accounts. In the late 60s, Richard started out as a fashion illustrator for teen magazines, and by the early 70s was running his own fashion footwear company, before going on to work for legendary design group Hypnosis. Away from The Who, Richard has produced work for such artists as Pink Floyd, Paul McCartney, The Doors, and Robert Plant, to name just a few. I spoke to Richard remotely back in July, and Talking About The Who members can listen to a bonus episode featuring more of our conversation, in which Richard talks about first discovering The Who, his favourite designs for the band, and his work on the upcoming Who Are You Super Deluxe Edition box set. If you'd like to become a Talking About The Who member and have access to both bonus and ad-free episodes, go to patreon.com/Talking About The Who and click on the membership tab to find out more. And if you've enjoyed our previous episodes, you can help push the podcast to a wider audience by giving us a 5-star rating on your favourite podcast app, which would be greatly appreciated. And so, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Richard Evans. First, I want to talk about something that obviously is happening very soon, and that's The Who's North American farewell tour. And I know you're currently in the process of putting the tour program together.
Well, seconds ago, I was just finishing the very, very, very last part of it. So,
oh wow,
putting one little picture back in. So, the tour book, without giving too much away, is kind of like a history of The Who. It's got the earliest photograph of The Who and the most recent photograph of The Who in it. So, there's a little bit of everything, and a lot of people in there, and a lot of little snapshots and silly pictures, funny pictures of Keith, obviously, and lots of other people who have been through the band in their time, and management and friends and associates and so forth. But it's fun, I always enjoy doing the tour books. They're great. The recent tour books, the wording has been done by a guy called Howie Edelson, this great guy from New York who he admires me and I admire him in the things we kind of do. He, like me, is a huge Beach Boys Brian Wilson fan, and he works on a lot of the Beach Boys box sets. So he always wants to know about The Who, and I always want to know about Brian Wilson. Rest in peace.
Yeah, of course.
It's great. He's a great person to work for, and very enthusiastic, which is always a bonus, really, when you're doing a project. It's good to have keen people on the team.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm just thinking, with a tour program that is part of the farewell tour, I guess, is it difficult to decide what does go into it? Because there's probably a lot you could put into it that I guess there's only a certain amount of room for everything.
Yeah, I mean, they're not programs anymore. I mean, program is like a theatre program. It tells you when the interval is and tells you what the first act and what the closing act and who the master of ceremonies is. But these days, tour books are basically picture books with it. I mean, some tour books don't even have any wordage in them. They're just sort of pictures of your heroes. But, we always do a good piece, a good read in it, and Howie's done a great one yet again. Again, as I said, he's enthusiastic about the band and absolutely passionate about and loves the band dearly. So it's great to have him along doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I can imagine it must be very satisfying when you do get the okay for it to go to print and and everything.
It was nice. I mean, I'm kind of like, years and years and years ago, took my mum into a record shop and said, "Look, Mum, I've did this," and she said, "Oh, right." Although in fact, I'll tell you a funny story. Years and years and years ago, when my mum was alive, and I was up to see her in when they lived in North Wales, and I took my mum into a record shop. And I'd just been working when I worked at Hypnosis. We'd done Paul McCartney and Wings Live Over America album, which is a gatefold sleeve and full of lots of goodies and things. And I took my mum into into the record shop and said, "Look, Mum, back cover, there's my name. Look." And she went, "Oh, that's nice, dear." You know. And on the way back, we called it the newsagent, and she had to get a copy of the Radio Times. And I opened the Radio Times and said, "Look, I did that drawing there for It's a Knockout or something." And she was going to the newsagent, "My son did that. Look at that." Working for a Beatle didn't impress her, but get my name in a Radio Times was the best thing for me. My son did that. So there you go. But yeah, I mean, I do, on a similar thing, coming back from on the tube for the last tour in 2023, was it the last UK tour? And we've been to see the Who in O2, wasn't it? I think, yeah, it was the O2. And coming back on the tube with my wife, and there's three guys sitting opposite me, and one of them's reading the tour book. My wife says, "He did that. He did that." And the guy says, "What do you mean he did it?"
You said, "Oh, I did, honest, I did."
Yeah, but he did do it.
I think if that was me and I saw someone looking at something I designed, I think I'd automatically start looking for mistakes on the front cover and that kind of thing.
Well, that's the big fear, of course. You get
Yeah.
it back from the printer and you open it up. And although you've scrutinized the damn thing for months, first thing you see is the typo. And you go, "Oh, no, why didn't I spot that before?" But it's a bit better these days with spell check and things like that. And finally, Universal have got proofreaders who go through it, with an eagle eye, because usually it's myself. If you're designing something, you read the thing and read the thing and read the thing, and you set the type and you change this and change that, and you're constantly looking at it, and you think you know it. I'm doing a box set or something. You work on this thing for so long, you know it inside out, back to front, and yet you still need somebody to go through it, a third party to go through it, or as many people as possible to go through it. So fortunately, in the past 12 months, Universal now have proofreaders who will go through it and point out the most bizarre errors and omissions. There's a full stop missed on page 244. But it's great. It all helps. So you don't get that thing where you get your copy back from your album sent to you from Universal and you see the glaring error. And there have been a few, I have to admit. Nobody's perfect.
No, that's it. I was going to say, I'm sure you're probably a bit like me, where it's very easy to kind of spot the mistakes and notice what's slightly wrong or askew, even if no one else would ever notice it. I think
Yeah,
it's very
yeah,
easy to spot that kind of stuff, and I
yeah,
personally have to sometimes remind myself, "Oh, but the good stuff's really good." But
yeah.
there'll be that one thing that,
Somebody
yeah,
points it out and you go, "No, I meant it to be like that."
I'll have to remember that one.
Yeah.
So do you travel with the band when they go on tour? Or so
No, no, I mean, why would they take the graphic designer with them? Why would they take the record cover guy with them? No, I don't. I mean, I go to the shows, I go to as many as I can within reason, but there are Who fans out there who, what do they call themselves? The front row center people, FRC. Like my dear friends Gary and Melissa Hurley, the Hurleys will be any front row picture you see of the Who, Gary and Melissa will be there, FRC, front row center. God bless them. That's not me. I don't do that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
I don't see the Who. I want to sit somewhere else. And just enjoy it. Because it's just enjoy hearing some good rock and roll. I'm not there to see what kind of shirt Roger's wearing or, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Oh, they've done that song in a slightly different order to the night before. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh, we were here last night and the night before and the night before that. Right. Not for me. No.
Yeah, it's funny. I met Gary and Melissa for the first time at the Quadrophenia Ballet a few weeks ago
Okay.
on the opening night at Sadler's
Yeah.
Wells, and it's funny because they're two names I've known of for quite a long time, and that's the thing with the Who. It's almost like some of their fans are almost famous in their own right amongst other Who fans. There's just certain names that are well known to people, and
Yeah, yeah, and certainly they are the ones who the band recognize. Pete always recognize them and Roger and people, and they're not going to wave at them and say, but they know they're there, kind of thing. And then there's the people you don't want to see.
yeah,
But yeah, and I've met lots of fans who somehow managed to find their way backstage, to the after show party, and you think, how do they do that? I met some lovely people, and I've met some people I try and avoid. But yeah, I mean, I met some lovely people. Funny enough, people that I've seen their photographs in the audience shots that the band photographer like William Snyder has done. And there was some people I met at the Teenage Cancer Trust show this year, the first one, and I thought I remember those people because I put their photograph on the liner bag of the Who at Wembley album. And there they are saying, "Oh, hi, Richard, nice to meet you." And oh, I know you. Yeah. So it's lovely. It's good to meet people who buy the record covers that you do, the record covers that you design, and they want to speak to you about it or whatever. It's good. It's great.
yeah, definitely. And I was at my first after show in April at the London Palladium for Roger's gig.
Yeah, yeah,
Very lucky to have been given a couple of after show passes, and
yeah,
I just found myself giggling half the time, thinking, "This is ridiculous. Why am I? How am I in this room with
yeah,
people like Jolie Linscott or Billy Nichols, who I've known of since I was 10 years old?"
yeah,
I mean, it was really, and Roger's band are such lovely people and everything, but it was very surreal from my from my
yeah.
perspective.
Well, I guess if you've known these people, and I mean, in Roger's band, there's Doug Boyle, and I travelled to Morocco with Doug when he was in Robert Plant's band, and back in 1988. So there are these people who come past your life for a brief period and then disappear, and then come in from another angle in a different band or whatever. So yeah, it's a big world, but there's a small family of people out there, of musicians like Billy and Jody and people.
Hmm.
And the Who are one of those bands. I'm sure the Stones and other bands are a bit like that too, but the Who really do have a family, of people like myself or people who are in the band, or there's some Irish Jack, or there's Barney, Richard Barnes, Barney, and people who have been associates of the band over the years. So it's good that they recognize them and they cherish their people, and I mean, there's a certain amount of trust. I'm sure half the time I get employed by the band because they trust me, because I've been doing it with them for so long. They think, well, he's not going to fuck up on anything. Oh God, there's going to be a typo in the tour book. I know it.
Yeah, that's something I've often thought about the Who, and they seem to just have a good feeling about certain people. And I was speaking to Matt Kent about this, and
Yeah,
I guess he almost found himself working for Pete Townsend almost by accident. But it just seems like, for example, he was managing Pete's websites, but he didn't have a clue about how to how to basically how anything like that worked. But it
no,
just felt like Pete just had a good feeling about him, and I guess it
yeah,
seems like they have that feeling about certain people, and they keep them close, as you say, and
yeah. I mean, I met Matt. Oh gosh, when I was doing the 30 years of Maximum R&B box set in 1993 or four or something,
mm,
and I was living in Los Angeles at the time when I did that box set, but I was over here to uh, do some various bits and pieces on the box set. And funny enough, I was at Gary and Melissa's house in the East End to photograph some posters that they had and what have you. And Matt happened to be there, and he gave me a lift back into town. Um, we had a good old chat. And then I can't remember. I always thought he was a post office engineer, but he never ever was. But I don't know what he was doing then. But we've been chums ever since, and we've done a lot of projects together, like the Who Are You box set, which is coming out.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that actually, as
Yeah,
something else is happening, and you're obviously involved in that.
yeah, yeah. I've been. I mean, box sets can take, well, as how long's a piece of string kind of thing. I mean, I think I started the Who Are You box set a year or so ago. It was summer of 2024, I think. Yeah, and we've just put it to bed recently. The past months. It's all in production at the moment. And whatever time this podcast goes out, it's probably either imminent or it's out today, folks.
Oh, hopefully, I'll try and time it perfectly. But can you give us any kind of indication when it's likely to come out?
End of October.
End of October.
I think it's 31st of October. It was supposed to be September, but it was delayed, I think, because of me. Because I wanted something special for the cover of the book, which is slightly out of the ordinary, which you will see. And that, oh well, that's going to that's going to change the delivery date. Yeah, but that's what I want.
Well, if you want me to edit that bit out, you could say, "Oh, it's the proofreader's fault at Universal. It's been delayed." I can put that in instead.
I don't mind. I don't mind. No, because I know that's why it was delayed. I know why it was put back. But only by a few weeks.
Yeah, and yeah, that's something else I spoke to Matt Kent about, and we were talking about the fact that I think it's part of the Who's history that's sometimes overlooked, and it's maybe because of Keith passing away soon afterwards. But I've always thought, Who Are You sort of gets slightly glossed over, so it'd be interesting to learn more about that part of the band's history.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I started working with the band in 75, 76. Who Put the Boot In was the project I was working on for that. And so Who by Numbers have been out the previous year. So apart from Kids Are All Right and quite a few in the soundtrack, the next big album was 78 was Who Are You, which I didn't have any involvement in the package of that at all, other than be at the Shepperton for the filming.
Hmm.
That was my only involvement, but I was just there to watch. And so glad I was.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm. But I had nothing to do with the packaging at all. But it was I thoroughly enjoyed doing the box set. Every box set is different, and I always get terribly enthusiastic about doing them and getting a different style to each one and trying to make each one slightly different.
Hmm.
So this one's a goodie. It really is good, and well, that's the packaging that I think is good. The music is also great. Obviously, I get to hear all the stuff months and months and months before you do, but from John Astley, who will send me all the sound files and stuff. So I listen to them while I'm designing it, of course. And they all chop and change as the months go by, and songs are added, songs are taken out, and you end up with what you end up with, which is 7 great CDs
Oh
of some
wow,
wonderful stuff.
wow! I
Um,
didn't think it'd be as many as 7, but wow.
yeah, 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 yeah. And
And
then of course there's well, it'll be out in August. It's all right. It'll be out by the time we're talking on this podcast. Is The Who at the Oval, which is a fabulous album. It really is. It's a real typical Who. Lots of fluffs and mistakes, lots of swearing, lots of clashes and bangs and what have you. And it's just raw 1971 Who at their finest.
hmm.
and it's great. Crank it up loud and let your neighbours hear it. Yeah,
Yeah, sounds like the quintessential Who performance, really.
yeah,
But
it's great. It's great. Yeah, and Jeff Dexter was emceeing it as well. So lovely story because Jeff Dexter in the photographs in the in the book that comes with the album, Jeff Dexter had been loaned all this cricket gear by the secretary of the MCC, so he's in full cricket whites with pads and the whole 9 yards. And he's loaned this very beautiful handmade cricket bat that's made by a company in Kennington who are still around, and very, very special cricket bat. And so you can see in all the photographs, Jess at the back with his long, straight blonde hair and cricket cap on and what have you. And on one of the songs, which one is it? I can't explain or something. I can't remember. Um, Keith snatches the cricket bat off Jeff and starts playing cymbals with it. Only just a couple of bars. And Jeff's waiting for it to be handed back, and Keith just lobs it into the crowd. Never to be seen again. Anyway, the club secretary was forgiving, apparently, but it was a very expensive cricket bat that somebody out there now has.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you've got it and you listen to this, make yourself known.
Yeah, yeah. It's probably on somebody's chimney breast of their sitting room, like a trophy.
Yeah, Keith Moon lobbed this and it hit me in the head or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, we were talking off mic about the cover a couple of days ago. Could you tell us a little bit about the design? Because I think it's an absolutely fantastic design. And I was curious if it was from an original poster for the gig, because there's the shot of the woman in the middle, which I was sort of curious
What
about.
it was, because I know Josh not that well, but Josh Townsend, who's Simon Townsend's son and Pete's nephew. And Josh is a lovely guy. He was in a late reincarnation of Thunderclap Newman a few years ago. I don't think with any of the original band members, but they were out doing live gigs as Thunderclap Newman. I think a couple of live shows somewhere or other. But Josh is a great artist, and he'd done some posters for the TCT, for Teenage Cancer Trust, and also for Bravado, whose merchandise company. And I've always loved the work he's done, and it's like a modern twist on classic rock posters from the late 60s, early 70s, very kind of not so much English psychedelia, more like the West Coast of America kind of psychedelia. So all those great people. And I thought, oh, in 1971, it'd be nice to get Josh in to do an album cover. He'd never done an album cover, but he's been doing all these great posters for the Teenage Cancer Trust shows. And I spoke to him about it. He was keen as mustard to do it. And I had in mind the kind of idea that I wanted to have. But before I hired Josh, I'd done a lot of picture research and found a photographer who was a photojournalist, just freelance job. He was photographing football matches one week and rock concerts the next week and what have you. And I tracked him down. And he still lives in Scotland, in Glasgow. I think he's retired now. He's probably even older than I am. And anyway, he sent me some of his photographs, and there were not that many of the band on stage. Very grainy shots, but good nevertheless. But he also sent me a great variety of photographs of the audience. Because it was an all-day, all-evening show. It started at I can't remember what time. Lunchtime, something like that, and went on till about 9:30 at night. So during the daytime, there's this sea of 1971 British hippies on the hallowed turf of the Oval, albeit they did put coconut matting down over the sacred turf. And of course it was a charity show for the Bangladesh, which was kind of like a follow-on to George Harrison's concert in New York that he did the concert for Bangladesh, and it was the same kind of same charity, same setup. And so there were lots of Hare Krishna people there, and lots of hippies and so forth, and lots of incense being burnt. So he photographed lots of the pretty girls and hippie girls and what have you. And there was one of them. It was a couple, a guy and his girlfriend, and he's got the regulational round glasses with shades and dead straight hair, and his girlfriend, who was in one of those Afghan coats that were always very smelly, those fur-lined Afghan coats, that embroidered coats that people used to wear back then, and probably smelled of camel pee or something. They were nice, but not very nice. And she had, again, the straight hair down here and a little headband around her. And I thought, oh, that's epitome. I remember girls like that back in those days, real hippie girls, and it kind of stuck in my head. So I had the idea of, for the layout, for the cover, of having a sort of circle in each corner for each of the four members of the band. And then, because of the oval, have this kind of ovoid egg shape in the middle. And I thought, well, I'll put a hippie girl in there. So I'd sent Josh some of these photographs of the girl. And Josh did some some rough ideas, but he did terribly 2025 glamorous girl with big pouty lips and very curly wavy hair and so forth. And I thought, no, that's not quite right. Anyway, I sent it to Pete and Roger, and Pete liked it, but Roger didn't like the girl on the front. He was going, it's not a fucking girls band. Well, of course it is, but it doesn't represent them. And I said, no, I agree with you. So I said to Josh, look at this one particular girl in the pictures I sent you. That's the girl I want, And so he redrew the girl, again, slightly more sort of glamorized her, I guess, and so she was the face of the oval, if you like, and he did it all as an inimitable style. I mean, I said I want that picture of Roger there and that picture of Pete and Keith playing the cricket bats, and John just being John, and he just went to town on all the little embellishments and what have you that he did, and I love it. It was great. We did some variations as well. We did one with what I call rubber sole lettering. It was kind of groovy lettering that just said live at the Oval. That was instead of the girl. And then I did another one with the crowd and the stage that said the Oval 1971, but it was, didn't have the same kind of impact as the girl. So they liked it and I liked it, and everybody's happy, and the record company thought it was great. And so that's what it is. I'm very pleased with it. It was a different cover. It was nice to employ an illustrator for a change. I used to do illustration back in the day, and a lot of stuff illustrated for the Who over the years. But these days, I don't do it. So it was nice to work with Josh. And again, it was keeping it in the family kind of thing. Having a Townsend having a credit on the back that isn't Pete.
And yeah, speaking of working for the Who, am I right in thinking your first ever Who commission was that picture of Keith Moon? That picture of Keith Moon with the football covering a certain part of his body.
Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about tour books. The first job for the Who was doing a tour book, which was doing Bellboy. At the time, I'd been working at the design company Hypnosis with Aubrey Powell and Storm Thorgerson. I'd been working with them for quite a few years, and I wanted to set up a studio on my own. And it worked out rather good, actually, because in 1976, when I did that, I think the Hypnosis was still very busy doing a lot of projects, and they said, well, look, they'd been hired to do the poster and everything for Who Put the Boot In tour, and they were so busy they actually farmed the poster out to, there was a studio called NTA Studios which comprised George Hardy, who worked a lot with hypnosis. He did the artwork for Dark Side of the Moon and lots of other stuff for Pink Floyd. And then there was an illustrator called Bush Hollyhead, who sadly died a few years ago, who was a great illustrator, fantastic illustrator, very 70s kind of style, but lovely, lovely guy. And they'd commissioned Bush to do the Who Put the Boot in poster, a great illustration of the ball flying up in the air, and Keith and Pete and everybody. And so that was already done. They'd farmed that out, but they had the concert program. And they said, "Can you do a concert program for the three shows, Swansea, Celtic, and Charlton?" I said, "Sure, fantastic." And I never worked for the Who. It's great, you know. And I went along to Trinifold, which in those days was in Kingley Street, a couple of doors down from where the old Bag of Nails used to be. And I met Bill, who was only just managing the band after Kit and Chris. And then there was this other young chap, my age, a couple of years younger, called Chris Chappell, who was working at Trinifold. Trinifold was only sort of 4 or 5 people tops, you know. There was Bill and his then wife Jackie and a few other people. And Chris and I hit it off as good friends and what have you. And so we devised the idea of doing a spoof of Playboy, based around the Keith song Bellboy off Quadrophenia. And I was totally up for that. So the first thing we did was I said to Chris, "Do you think Keith Moon would be up for doing a centrefold?" And he mentioned it to Bill, and Bill laughed and said, "Of course he would." You know? And of course, Keith was living in California, and but was over here for the show. I think he was in California back then. Yeah, he must have been. And so we arranged to photograph him. I couldn't take photographs back in those days, and so I asked Storm at Hypnosis, would he take this photograph for me? And Storm reluctantly agreed. And Keith and Annette were staying at the Royal Garden Hotel in Kensington. And so Chris Chaplin and I went to Birmingham and Nathan as the theatrical costumiers, and we hired a bellboy's outfit. And we just got the largest one we could find. It turned out it wasn't quite big enough because Keith had put a bit of paunch on by then, as you can see in the Who Are You cover. Anyway, he was totally up for it because it was dressing up and it was fun and what have you. And I was slightly nervous going to a hotel room to meet Keith. and so we turned up there, Chris and I, with this costume and a football, and Keith was more than welcoming and come in and all the usual kind of stuff, calling everybody dear boy, of course, you know, and putting on this public school accent all the time. And Annette hurriedly got dressed and went off shopping, leaving us to it, you know. And I remember the hotel room was a bit of a tip, you know. There were things like bedside tables which were upside down on the floor. You think, why? You know, had you been throwing the furniture around the room? Or, you know, I went to the bathroom, and the lavatory had a couple of towels stuffed in it, you know, and I was thinking, yeah. But you know, we dressed him up in the outsize or very small bellboy outfit. Unfortunately, you know, it had a sort of military front where there weren't buttons. There were buttons, but there was Velcro on the inside, so we were heaving him into it, you know, pushing his stomach in and what have you. And we dressed him up in the bellboy's outfit with a little hat on, and got him a tray of drinks. And my instruction to him was, this was the cover of Bellboy. I said, I want you to come in to the room when I call you and walk into the room with a tray of drinks. And I want an expression that you've just caught a couple on flagrante in the room. He said, yeah, I'll do that. So when he came in the room, it was like, which is the picture you see on the cover. And he was great. He was a very good actor, and he really got into it. So we did that first. That was the cover shot, and then we did the the on the sofa shot, and I think I got a copy of Men Only, or one of those glossy tit and bum magazines of the day, and there was a photograph. Kind of, I said, I want you like that. And so he relaxed on the sofa, and we did some with it, nothing over his bits, and we did some with the football, and Annette's first stole was another thing, and but in the end, I think we just went with the football. I think I can't remember. I know it was on the cover of Sounds because I've just put that in the tour book. But yeah, he was totally into it. It was great fun, and the funny thing is, that Storm Thorgerson died about 12 years ago, and I remember speaking to him in the few months before he died, and I said about the photographing Keith, and Storm had absolutely no memory of the day at all. And you'd think anybody who'd done a photo session with Keith would remember. Storm said, I really can't remember doing that. Man, you'd photographed the world and his wife over 50 years. So, Keith was just one of many things that he did. But yeah, no memory of it. So, that was my induction into working for the Orbaloo. Here we are, which will be next year would be 50 years. 50 years.
Wow, congratulations.
I know. I've got a good friend of mine who was similar to myself, and he did a few album covers, but he also did a lot of interior design. And amongst the things he designed McCartney's offices in Soho Square. Everything from the door handles to the carpet and his biggest achievement was he designed the Bieber store in Kensington. The big super store. You're probably too young to remember that, but it was huge at the time. And I was telling Steve Thomas about this, and he said, "Well, how long have you been working for the Who?" And I said, "Well, I said 44 years or something." He said, "Oh, you must have a good contract." And I said, "I haven't got a contract." He said, "Fuck you." He said, "You worked for somebody for 40 something years with no contract." He said, "That's amazing." I said, "Yeah, yeah, maybe I should ask for one. But he said, "No, don't do that. You'll spoil it."
Is it like Keith's famous quote that I've just been sitting in for the past 44 years? They never
And that's
told me I was
right.
actually.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's right, because I think after the first gig, didn't Roger say, uh, "Oh, well, one of the first gigs, I think was it in Streatham," and Roger said, "Well, we'll see you tomorrow. We'll pick you up tomorrow." So, what a way to go! Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it was your first ever interaction with the Who, but I know you told me recently that you actually booked them to play a gig in Nottingham in 1965.
Yeah, and well, 1965, I'd left school in 1962, and then I went to the local art school to do a sort of uh, starter kind of course, and then you go off to some big art school to do your BA degree in art, and it was the beginning of the 60s, and in my group there were I don't know, about a dozen people, some girls, some boys, and all the boys went off and did fashion design, including myself. And all the girls went off and did sculpture, totally the opposite. You kind of think, well, the girls would do fashion, but we all wanted to be fashion designers, including myself. So I went off to Nottingham School of Art, and I did 3-year BA course in fashion and textiles. And I sort of got into the whole scene in Nottingham, which was great. It was nice living I'd never lived in a city, I'd always lived in small towns or villages and stuff. So here I am in Nottingham, which seemed huge, and it was a great scene. It was fantastic, and there was a good scene for young kids and certain bars and things you went to, which guess they're still going. And there was a great club in Nottingham called the the Beachcomber Club in the old Lace Market, which was fantastic, and I saw a lot of bands in the Beachcomber, including an all-nighter in '66 with Jimi Hendrix Experience, and the support was Jimmy Cliff.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
that's quite a bill.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's fantastic. So saw a lot of bands there, and the art school also used to organize. Well, they'd have an arts ball once a year, and we had various bands there, the Nashville Teens, and we had the Kinks one year, who were fantastic. And the promoter who was selling us the Kinks said, well, you can have the Kinks, but they'll be £600. And now, if you want a support band, I got this other band which you can have for 80 quid for the night. They're called the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band. So we said, yeah, we'll have them. Because what happened, I wanted to have a kind of say on which bands that we booked. So I kind of blagged myself onto the social committee, students who organize all these kind of events. And this is where the Who comes in, because once a month we'll have what we call art school hops. And they were just dances in tiny little venues. There was a place in West Bridgeford called the Dancing Slipper. We'd have people like Long John Baldry and or the Steam Packet, with Elton John on keyboards, Reg Dwight as he was, and Rod the Mod Stewart people. So with those kind of bands, the up and coming acts and what have you. And I just bought the single of Can't Explain, so it would have been 65, the winter of 65. And I said, we've got to get this band. They're fantastic. So we did I think it was May of 65. And so we got the Who to play. And I think, I can't remember how much we paid, a couple of £100, 300 quid, 400 quid or something. And they turned up late. They turned up a couple of hours late. And the venue was Nottingham's answer to the Cavern Club. It was called the Dungeon Club, and it was a shitty old cellar in the back end of Nottingham. But it was great, and it was a good venue, and they got loads and loads of bands there and what have you. And we'd been commissioned to decorate it because the chap who owned it said he wanted it decorating in a kind of, make it jazz it up a little bit. And he said he was prepared to pay for 2 crates of beer if we would do it overnight. So we went there, I think for a couple of nights, and we sort of painted it in op art, black and white op art kind of thing, as it was 65, I guess. Yeah, it was 65. And so that's where we had the Who, and the Who turned up 2 hours late, by which time all the students were pretty pissed anyway. And the Who played. They were fantastic. Funny enough, I don't remember John, which is not surprising, with John just standing at the back, not doing very much. And I can't really remember Roger, but I do remember Keith, who wouldn't, and I remember Pete, because me being a fashion student, I was into kind of modism and that whole kind of stuff, and not directly a mod, but I was interested in clothes, so I was checking this guy out and thinking, he's kind of pretty cool looking guy, and skinny guy, and doing the windmilling and wiggling his backside and all that kind of stuff that Pete did, and the Birdman, all this kind of stuff. And I thought, this guy's really got it down to a T, and I was very impressed with him. And so yeah, that was my first involvement. I mean, I didn't speak to them or meet them or anything like that, but yeah, I got the record and I got to see the band, for nothing. So that was my first meeting with the band. So when I was asked to design Bellboy magazine, and I don't know if the other day when we spoke, but you asked me if I was a big Who fan. Not particularly. I mean, I love the Who, but I loved all the '60s bands. I was when I was living up in North Wales, I was a fairly frequent visitor to the Cavern Club in Liverpool, so I saw a lot of those Liverpool bands, and I still love certain of those Liverpool bands, the Big Three, the Mersey Beats, the Searchers, um, obviously the Beatles, but there were some great, not so well-known bands around at the time, Jackie Lomax's Undertakers and bands like that. So yeah, I saw a lot of those bands in Liverpool when Scylla was the cloakroom girl at the Cavern. I remember that. So that was my kind of music that I was into. And I was getting into blues. I mean, I'm still a huge blues fan. You know, Delta blues and Chicago blues and Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and all those guys. That's still my kind of music. But yeah, the Who were amongst them. The Who and the Kinks, and I wasn't that much taken on the Stones. But I was a Northern guy, so my band was the Beatles, not the Stones. But yeah, I mean, same as today, I've got a huge, broad taste in music. There's some music I can't abide, but there's a lot of music I absolutely love. But yeah, and the Who is one of them.
How did the social media and the website management come about?
Um, the Who.com began in 2007, November 2007, and I designed the kind of look of the website back then, the original one, nothing like it is today. And they needed a webmaster. And Robert Rosenberg, who along with Bill Kirby, is one of the two managers of the Who. And Robert had a friend called Rob Lee, really nice guy, who he'd known for a long, long time, who was not particularly Who fan, but he was looking for a bit of employment, and they offered him the job of running the Who's website, kind of what I do nowadays. And I'd never heard of him, never met him. He was just a friend of Robert Rosenberg. And so they got Rob Lee in to run it. And he and I worked together a lot on the initial setting up of the website. And, he gave me a bit of advice on one or two bits and pieces and what have you. And back then, the websites are usually managed by whoever the merchandiser is. And back in those days, it was a company called Band Merch based out of America. And so Rob worked for them for 7 years, and then sadly, Rob died in 2014, about February 2014. It was terribly sad, and so the Who.com was without somebody to look after it, and it was a very, very sad period. And Bill and Robert and Pete and Roger had a meeting or chatted about it, and they said, "Well, who can we get to do it?" And they said, "Well, let's ask Richard Evans." And I had no idea how to run the back end of a website, or put the content in and what have you. And it was 2014, and that was still with Band Merch. And so I started running the Who's website then in March 2014. And we were with Band Merch for the next 3 years. And it was a peculiar period because, if I wanted something done on the website, I had to email these people in Los Angeles, and they had to then email somebody in Texas, and where the person was who did the back end work on the website, doing this and putting this and that. So it was a terrible, long-winded process. Anyway, we bounced along doing that for 3 years, and then in 2017, the merchandising license finished, and they appointed Bravado to be the merchandisers, who are still the merchandisers. Now, Bravado is part of the Universal Music Group, run out of London. And so the first thing we did, we all had a meeting, and I was saying what a pain in the neck it was running the website in the current way. And they said, well, we're quite happy to do a complete overhaul, complete redesign, and you'll be able to run the website yourself. Not the techie side of it. I'm useless at that kind of stuff. And so they appointed a web designer based in Cardiff um, to design the website. And I went and met up with him, and I don't know anything about web design, but I know about design. So, over meetings with him, we came up with the idea for what is now the current website. And it's done on a system called WordPress, which is quite a well-known system for websites. And he taught me the rudiments of getting onto the back end of the website, so you can change this and put this in here and make new pages and add on bits and pieces or what have you. So, it was a bit like teaching somebody to drive a car in two lessons. But he was always there at the end of the phone if I got stuck. So that's how it's now done. I mean, I've been doing it since on the new website since 2017, which is what, 8 years. And it's great. I mean, I sometimes think, they're very lucky that they got me as a graphic designer, because if I want to do a bit of graphics for the website, then I do it. Rob wasn't a website, wasn't a graphic designer, so I don't know what he did. I mean, I know I got a few things he asked me to do. Can you knock this up? Can you knock that up? And but I mean, now running the website as a graphic designer is great, because I'll style it. I don't alter the actual backbones of the website. It is what it is until the next time we update it. But all the content is controlled by me. So, if there's a new album coming up, then I'll put it on the album set on the music section. If there's something happening, an announcement, I'll do it on the news page. If there's a tour coming up, I'll put the tour dates in, all that kind of stuff. And along with that, they said, and can you run the social media as well? And I didn't really know that much about social media. I think Rob Lee had got me onto Facebook because he wanted to show me some music he put on there or something like that. And, Instagram wasn't really operating that much. I think he'd only done about 2 or 3 posts. And Twitter, I always thought Twitter was a bit of a waste of time, to be honest. I still do. Uh,
Yeah, it's hard
yeah,
disagreeing with that. It's hard to
yeah,
disagree with that.
it's kind of like, oh God, if you're doing a post on social media saying, oh yeah, there's Twitter as well. All right, okay. Yeah. But I started doing that and really got into it. Maybe not so much these days. All of social media's not particularly pleasant these days. I think Roger Daltrey's quite right when he refers to it as anti-social media. Um, I love doing stuff for it, but there's an awful lot of shit out there on social media, and people are
Mm.
forever arguing. If I put a post up and say, the sky's blue, they'll all start arguing. No, no, well, it isn't. Or whatever, and everybody starts disagreeing with each other. Then it all turns nasty, and you have to go and delete posts or kick people off and ban them or block them and stuff. I mean, and then there's all those things about people come on and say, "Oh, hi, I'm Roger Daltrey." No, you're not.
I've had a few Roger Daltrys reach out to me in recent
Yeah,
months, and
yeah. I was, I do a lot of stuff with Robert Plant, and we're good pals. And I looked at his Facebook page today because he's got a new album coming out that I just worked on, and there's all these comments saying, fake Robert Plant saying to girls, "Hi, would you like to have a private chat with me?" And then even people posing as Robert's children, "Hi, I'm Carmen Plant,"
oh
and
god,
his manager, saying I'm Robert. And it's all that kind of stuff you have to delete and block and what have you. So, there is a dark side of social media that's pretty horrible. But there
yeah,
are lovely things about social media. Um, but sometimes it kind of gets you down because you're looking at all this crap, you know, that people are all arguing. And of course, in recent months, there's been that whole Zach thing going on,
Hmm.
because I also, there's a forum on the Who's website as well. People were dissecting and analyzing the whole Zach Roger Pete situation. It just went on and on and on and on, all based on rumor, and the only people who know are Pete, Zach, and Roger, and a few others. But I'm not going to put any comment at all about it. It's not my place to. But just having that on social media was extremely tedious and boring, to be honest. And I speak to all of them. I speak to Zach occasionally too, and he'll phone me up and bend my ear about a few things. But again, it's the Who family, and people pass through the Who family, as musicians or whatever. And Scott Devos is going to be in the band for the tour, and he's a nice guy too. So
Yeah, I came away from that after show at the London Palladium thinking Scott Devowers is possibly the nicest man I've ever met in
I
my
don't know if he's
life.
Devowers or Devos or whatever. Devowers.
I actually asked him,
It
it was
is Devowers.
Devowers
Okay,
from the horse's mouth,
Devowers.
yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Because he told me even Roger gets it
Well,
wrong.
I've always called him Devos. So right, Devowers. Scott Devowers. It is. Okay. That's the other thing as well. People on social media never spell Zach correctly, and they spell Roger with a D. So if you're listening to this and you're on social media, it's Roger, and it's Zak, Zach. But please don't write posts about Zach, because we've had enough of posts about Zach.
You just reminded me of something. Speaking about social media, I did a post on one of the Who groups a few
Mm.
months ago because I thought it would generate an interesting conversation. So I just went on there and said, I've never actually sat down and listened to White City by Pete Townsend from
Yeah.
start to finish. I mean, I love songs from it, but I've never sat down and heard the whole album. Are there any solo albums that anyone else has never listened to? And some guy just replied, "You're either a loser or a liar because you can't be serious."
Oh yeah. Never
Okay.
admit you've never heard something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, you've got to know everything, every little nuance, every lyric, But what the heck? Anyway.
Well, I was quite worried before when I first started doing this podcast that I didn't know everything, and I was worried that Who fans wouldn't like someone who didn't know
Yeah.
everything doing a
Yeah.
podcast. But then I spoke to I don't know if you're familiar with Dante DiCarlo. He's in a Who tribute band, and he's just written a book
Yeah.
about the
Yeah.
Who. And I met him when I went to see his band at going back to the Cavern Club. I saw his band there in
Oh,
February, and telling him the same thing. And he said, "Well, if you knew everything, what would be the point of doing a
yeah, that's
podcast?"
right.
And I thought that's actually a really
Yeah,
good way of
yeah.
looking
You'd
at
be
it.
telling us stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But we won't talk to you about it for an hour. I'll just tell you. But no, it's true. I mean,
Exactly. I'll tell you how you should be designing the
yeah,
album covers. And
and I don't know everything about the Who. I mean, I know it's great because Polydor Records seem to see me as the sort of the great guru of font of knowledge of the Who. And okay, I know some stuff, but I got an awful lot of books to look up if I need to check something out. But I know that Shepperton was the 25th of May,
so, yeah,
1978, and stuff like that. I mean, I'm a fond of useless knowledge at the best of times anyway. I'll come out with some rock and roll trivia, and somebody says, "How the hell do you know that?" Well, I thought it might come in handy one day. Connie Francis's birthday, rest in peace. You know, um, I don't know her birthday, by the way.
yeah, I know
I
what you
think my
mean.
brother said to me once, "So no, it's our wedding anniversary on the 7th." I said, "Yeah, I know. I haven't forgotten. It's Buddy Holly's birthday." Like, what?
I was thinking recently because I'm about to do at the time of recording, I'm about to do a live stream with a friend of mine about Meaty Beaty Big and
Yeah,
Bouncy,
yeah,
and I'm sure I once read somewhere that the title came from a dog food commercial, but I can't find any evidence of it from googling it. And I've asked a few people I know who are Who fans, and I even ended up emailing Chris Charlesworth and Matt Kent
yeah.
about it. just saying, have you ever heard this? And they came back and said, it sounds feasible, but I don't know
I
about
think
that. So I'm convinced I've made it up
no, I
somehow.
think you're probably half right because meaty and bouncy sound like they would have been part of it. If it was anything, it would have been either pal or chum. Because back
Hmm.
in those days, there wasn't any other tin dog food. It was either TV advertising was pal or chum dog food. So it was one of those two, I would imagine. But yeah, I mean, I seem to remember it was kind of like Rice Krispies, Snap, Crackle, and Pop, and pal was meaty and chunky and something, and makes your dog bouncy. You know, as the other people said, it sounds feasible. So yeah, but it does.
Yeah. I dare not ask it in a Who group on Facebook, because I'll get called a loser or a liar again.
Right. But yeah, I mean, as every fool knows, it's the four members of the band, isn't it? Yeah, isn't it? Yeah,
As far
yeah,
as I know,
yeah,
yeah. But
yeah. But who titles? I think up who titles sometimes. Um, Who's Missing was one of my titles. I did the cover too, and then MCA said, "We want to do Who's Missing Volume 2." I said, well, "That's a boring title. Call it Two's Missing." Oh yeah, yeah. Hooligans. That was one of mine too. Yeah. Because it was a compilation album, and I was trying to think of a name about doing something again, and I had Who Will Again, the Who Will Again, Hooligan, Hooligan.
I'll ask you this final question. I'm not sure how easy it is to answer because I've asked it to a few people, but I'll ask it anyway. Can you sum up in a few words or sentences just what the Who mean to you?
Great music, played well, sometimes played badly, but it doesn't matter. Um, Funny, yeah, amusing. The Who have always been an amusing band, you know. Sometimes the Who sound incredibly amateur, but that's what I like about it. You know, when I love it when bands make mistakes when they're in the middle of a number. You know, somebody plays a bum note or something. You think, great, you're human. You know, you're not perfect. Um, that's what the Who is. The Who make mistakes. You can quote me. The Who make mistakes, but you know, there are still things. I've always said this. You know, you go to a Who concert. Who always used to start with "Can't Explain," and you know, I've been to countless Who concerts. But you sit there, they come on, they plug in, and you hear the first four chords of "Can't Explain," and the hair on the back of your neck goes up. You think, "Dun, dun, 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 dun," and you think, "Oh yes, we're off. We're off for the next 2 hours," you know. And yeah, I saw. I mean, there are lots of videos you can see on YouTube of the 50th anniversary shows, you know, the Who Hits 50 shows, and they were starting with that with great graphics behind my logo, which was spinning around, and Roger's spinning his microphone and launching into the opening lines of "Can't Explain." That to me is what the Who is all about in sound and vision.
And there we have it, my conversation with Richard Evans. And in case anyone's wondering, since talking to Richard, I've managed to find out that it was photographer Graham Hughes, Roger Daltrey's cousin, who said that the title Meaty Beaty Big and Bouncy came from a dog food commercial. So you heard it here first. Maybe. As I mentioned earlier, Talking About the Who members can access a bonus episode featuring more of my conversation with Richard Evans, as well as other bonus episodes featuring such Who luminaries as Andy Neal, Mandy Moon, Chris Charlesworth, Jodie Lynn Scott. The list goes on. A Talking About the Who membership costs just £3 or $3 a month, which is cheaper than a pint of beer in your local pub or a cup of coffee in Starbucks. And as well as bonus and ad-free episodes, you'll also be able to hear our series of 60th anniversary specials, the next one of which celebrates the UK release of the My Generation single and is out on 29th of October. You'll also be invited to watch an exclusive live Zoom interview with Who author and photographer Matt Kent about the upcoming Who Are You Super Deluxe Edition box set, which is taking place at 8 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time on Friday 28th of November. And if that wasn't enough, you'll also receive invites to our semi-regular Who discussion spin-off show, The Members Room, all for just £3 or $3 a month. Go to patreon.com/Talking About The Who and click on the membership tab to sign up. Any financial support we receive really does help to keep the podcast going. However, you can also support us without becoming a member. Go to buymeacoffee.com/Talking About The Who to make either a one-off donation or set up a monthly donation. If you prefer not to part with any money but would still like to help us out, then you can give us a 5-star rating on the podcast app you listen to us on. A huge thank you, as always, to everyone who's helped support Talking About The Who thus far. To stay up to date on all Talking About The Who shenanigans, you can follow us on our social media channels, namely Facebook, Bluesky and Instagram. And if you want even more Who related content, head on over to our YouTube channel and please subscribe while you're there. All the relevant links are in the show notes. Finally, a big thank you once again to Amanda Evans for technical support, and a big thank you to our special guest, Richard Evans, no relation. Not only for a fascinating conversation, but for all his help and support since then. Richard, you are truly a scholar and a gentleman. And that's it for this episode. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time for the Season 2 finale, featuring as our special guest, the lead singer of The Detours, the band that became The Who, Colin Dawson. So until then, thank you for listening, look after yourselves, and as Roger Daltrey always says, be lucky. Goodbye.